question. If grief doesn't change us or helps one to understand like the shortness of life and living it better, so then is there if life is all suffering, then just maybe knowing that all the time constantly, would that then help to be able to go on with life? Meaning, like, can we just keep going then? But we have to keep doctrinating that thought in our mind, life is suffering, so that we can just be saturated with it so that we don't fool ourselves. Is that what's going to help us to keep on going in this world? I don't know if that makes sense.
You know, there is discomfort, and there's a mild degree of pain in discomfort. Then there is, for example, a toothache where it's hitting the nerve. It's really, really painful. Then there is trauma. And what all three have in common is that they all create a sense of loss inside you. Loss of health, loss of comfort, loss of stability. Okay. And they all have their own unique ways of kind of expressing grief. You know, if you have a really bad toothache, sometimes you scream, for example. What you have in the Gospels, what you have in the Quran, what you have in Buddhism, is that life itself is a very traumatic experience. Not like getting a job or getting into a marriage or having children. Everything about life is traumatic. It's not like you can like move from Oakland to Richmond and experience less violence. It's the same. It doesn't matter where you go, okay? So there is no place where you can go in life where trauma doesn't come to you. The problem with that, Lula, is that first, the experience of trauma and pain and grief and discomfort and all of that, the first stage is just the emotions that trauma creates. And they are maddening, they are difficult. It takes you to places where you have never been. You react and you express yourself like a child, you know. And there is no direction. There are no signposts. You keep kind of wondering, why is this happening? And there are no answers. And it's not like you can sit and think about this intelligently or rationally, because that's what grief is. It's intense eruption of emotions that they just overtake you, every part of you. You can't sleep, you can't eat. I mean, consider when you fall in love with someone and they told you they'll call you at 9 and it's like midnight and haven't called you. You can't sleep. It makes no sense. You know, you're a single woman, right? The world is about 8 billion people, 9 billion, and there are about like 5 billion men. Well, go out there and find yourself a man. For some strange reason, it's just this one man that has kind of captured you. So the first thing that happens to you is emotions. They leak everywhere. Your mom says hello and you say, "Why are you talking to me?" You know. Your boss says, "Can you put the dishes away?" You say, "You do it. I'll pay you." So no one can do you right when you're kind of consumed by these emotions. Now, a couple of things can happen when you have a traumatic experience that causes, this hurricane inside you. Because it takes a while for you to look at them as companions and learn from them. And it's not going to help you to go to workshops, read books, because these are all bumper stickers, The first thing that you need to realize is that as a human being, you will do whatever you possibly can to continue your survival. And it's not by understanding trauma, but by forgetting the trauma. That's the first thing that all of us do when we have a bad experience. If you're a Socrates and if you're just like a professional thinker, professional human being who just goes through life wanting to understand things, you don't want to escape anything. You don't blame anything. You don't blame anyone. You don't even blame yourself. You sit and kind of examine it. The rest of us, we don't have that particular capacity. So you will do whatever you can, to forget, to escape. The problem with trauma is that, it's like boredom. It just patiently waits for you. And then, once it finds the right time, it knocks on your door and says, "Remember me?" It's kind of like you wake up one morning and you realize when it comes to relationships, you're just incompetent. You don't know how to be in one. You're just no good at them. You don't have the proper tools. You don't really understand them. So you say, "Okay, well, I'm just going to dump this guy and just take some time." Well, you're not going to do well with loneliness. It's difficult being alone. So you read a couple of books, you go to a few workshops, you watch a few Dr. Phil's and Dr. Oz. Say, "Okay, well, I think I figured things out." Then you get back into it. And then you stay with this guy or this gal for a few months or a few years, and you realize, man, you really suck at this. Then you go out. And you really haven't done anything except to kind of push the knowledge of your own incompetence into the dungeon somewhere inside you. But you can't cage it. It's eventually going to come out. So remember, when you talk about grief and life being a traumatic experience, you're not going to wrestle with it in a way of understanding it. You will do what you can to run away from it. It's like someone emailing me saying, "Professor, how can I write a better essay?" Well, I don't know. Why don't you ask Henry David Thoreau? Why don't you ask T.S. Eliot? Stupid kid. Then there comes a point where you just have to get tired of just running away, of just being incompetent and making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And that creates its own, depression and despair. First you can't figure out life. The fact that you can't figure out life has made you depressed. And it's not a fun place to be. You look around you, that person is married, and that person is married with 10 kids, that person has a job, that person goes out and has a good time, and here you are moping around. And then depression turns into anger. Why is it that everybody can do so well in life and here I am, look at me, what's wrong with me? So whatever sanity you had, it kind of just goes out the window. And you live in this culture. This is a crappy culture. First it makes you sick, then it medicates you, which makes you sicker. There is no support system. In some ways Marx was really quite accurate in suggesting that the system just alienates you. It makes you a stranger. It doesn't matter if you're married or have children or parents. You're just a stranger to everybody, including yourself. Now remember, Lula, the problem with trauma is that it pushes you into poverty. There is physical poverty, there is emotional poverty, there is intellectual poverty. And I suppose if you believe in the spiritual part, there's a spiritual poverty. And poverty is no fun, man. It's like being sick all the time, and the only place you go is Kaiser. And you're poor because you don't have the basic tools. You don't have money to eat. You don't have the tools to fix yourself emotionally or intellectually. So poverty always makes you weak. And that's what trauma does. It makes you weak. And there is so much anger, and you have every right to be angry. Edward Munch in his painting, The Scream. People are holding hands, they're having a good time. You're on the bridge and you're screaming because your life is crappy and nobody cares. You take that to someone like Eckhart Tolle, he says, well, live with anger. Are you kidding me? If you get lucky where you want to understand the trauma called life, it's like a parent holding a child's hand. Your intellect has to come down from somewhere and hold the emotions. Make sure they don't run wild. The problem now with wanting to understand why all this stuff is happening, why life is so tragic, if it is tragic at all, is that there is no GPS. Where do you go to understand? That in itself creates its own set of confusions. It's very traumatic. The book of Job is about a man who's having a very traumatic experience. And he doesn't get it. It's only after like 1,000 pages where God comes down to him and says, you're just a maggot. You're stupid. Just shut your mouth and accept life just the way it is. You will never have the capacity to understand it. It's kind of like the marriage vows. Imagine you're the Buddha and you want to get married. What sort of vows will you have? Honey, I don't love you. I can never love you. I'm never going to be attached to you because I have lost that capacity. I'm with you for one reason. sometimes I need help walking. You will be the cause of my suffering. You will force me to do things I don't want to do. And I will do the same for you. You will hate me as well. We will be happy only when we forget how miserable we really are. Now that's a really good marriage vow. When you want to understand something, Lula, what usually happens is first you try to figure out your emotions, and after a while you just give up. And then you say, maybe I should just ask other people. I should read books, listen to like audiobooks and go to workshops and go to church. If you're really, really, really honest about your quest, you'll come to realize that, people just talk and it doesn't mean anything. That they may even talk, it may even mean something, it may even be profoundly good and inspiring. But at the end of the day, you just go home alone with no real understanding. And if you're very, 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 very lucky, you say, I'm just not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to talk to anyone. I'm not going to allow anyone to talk to me. I'm just going to figure things out on my own. You don't do this at the beginning because it's no good, it's poison. You do it at the end. You've gone to enough church, you've read enough Bible, you've talked to enough priests, you've become angry enough times, depressed enough times, where now you can sit in your room and you can write, or you can think. It's no different than wanting to learn how to play the piano. They're just steps you have to take. You can't skip steps, it doesn't work. And it's good to understand in this way, because then you don't expect ridiculous things from yourself. It's like a 10-year-old coming to you saying, I think I'm in love. Well, as a parent, you have to be profoundly foolish to take your child seriously. You're 10.